What's up guys, it's Coaster Werewolf here, and in the summer of 2022, I went to Cedar Point for the first time and rode some amazing world-class coasters. So in this video, I'm going to be ranking the ones that I rode. Now unfortunately, Top Thrill Dragster was and still is closed from the 2021 accident, so I was not able to ride it, and I also didn't ride Wilderness Run because you need a kid to ride it, so those two rides will not be included on this list. But without further ado, let's get into the list, starting at number 14 with Woodstock Express, a Vekoma Jr. coaster. This is basically just an average small family coaster, so I don't have much to say about it, but it's a good ride for kids, and it's surrounded by some trees, which gives it a nice atmosphere. Next at number 13 is Cedar Creek Mine Ride, the park's Aero Mine Train. This coaster does have some pretty janky transitions, but it's overall a pretty fun ride. The setting over the water looks really nice, and there's also some decent theming, so overall a pretty good family coaster. Taking the number 12 spot is Iron Dragon, the Aero Suspended Coaster. And although it is, in my opinion, the weakest Aero Suspended Coaster that I've ridden, it's still another fun family ride. The setting in the trees, long ride duration, and swinging aspect all make this a fun and enjoyable ride. And even though it's kind of shaky, you can still look past that and enjoy the coaster for what it is. Moving on to number 11, which is Corkscrew, the Aero Looper that was the first coaster to have 3 inversions. And even though this ride gets a lot of hate, I found it to be pretty fun and underrated. First of all, while it's not the smoothest ride, I found it was pretty easy to avoid the headbanging by keeping my head forward. Also, that hill after the drop gave a surprising pop of ejector that nobody seems to talk about. So overall, I was pretty pleasantly surprised by Corkscrew, and I do recommend riding it. Next at number 10, I have Gemini, yet another coaster by Aerodynamics. This ride to me felt like Cedar Creek Mine Ride on a bigger scale, with more drops and some pretty good airtime. Racing the other train is always fun, and even though it's kind of bumpy and has some bad transitions towards the end, it's bearable and enjoyable. Moving on, at number 9 I have Blue Streak, the PTC Woody that's also the oldest operating coaster in the park. What I like about this ride is that it has that vintage wooden coaster feel while also being pretty smooth, especially for its age. There's also some good airtime and some decent laterals, so overall it's a fun classic wooden coaster. Now in the next spot, I have a pretty controversial opinion, and I'm probably gonna get a lot of hate for this, but at number 8 I have Magnum XL-200, the first ever hypercoaster. Honestly, I went into this ride with pretty high expectations, but I walked away kind of disappointed, because while I do agree that the airtime hills at the end give some very strong ejector, people don't talk enough about how painful this coaster is. First off, it kind of jackhammers almost the whole ride, and towards the end, my spine literally felt like it was about to snap. Also, these have to be some of the worst restraints, especially on an airtime-focused ride. I don't mind these restraints too much on coasters like Cedar Creek Mine Ride, because coasters like that don't have much airtime, but when you're getting airtime that strong, back to back, it feels like your legs are getting amputated. Not to mention that the first half of the ride is kind of pointless, as the first few hills don't do much, and the turnaround gives basically no forces. So even though Magnum has some very strong airtime in the finale, it's almost too painful to enjoy. Now this next spot might be even more controversial, because at number 7 I have Rougarou, the park's B&M floorless coaster. And I'm gonna be honest, I just don't understand all the hate this ride gets. The most common complaint about Rougarou is the roughness, and yes, it does have a rattle. But does it actually bring any pain? Not really. And I didn't even get any headbanging, so I don't really get how people think it's rough, especially when it's in the same park as Magnum. Another thing that people don't like about this coaster is the layout, but not having a 0G roll doesn't automatically make it a bad layout. In fact, I actually think this layout is pretty good. There's some forceful inversions throughout the ride, and some pretty snappy transitions towards the end in that twister section. And since it used to be a stand-up, there are some unique elements that you wouldn't normally find on a floorless, like an incline loop. So overall, I think Rougarou is a pretty good ride and very underrated, just like another floorless coaster with a bad reputation at a park with lots of coasters. Moving on to number 6, I have Valravn, the B&M dive coaster. I know dive coasters aren't exactly well received by most enthusiasts, but I found this to be a very fun ride. The drops had great airtime even with the vest restraints, and the inversions were fun and floaty. I also thought that the airtime hill towards the end had some good airtime as well, and even though it's a pretty short ride, it's good at what it does. It's not the most forceful coaster, but it's just one that's a lot of fun to ride. Next at number 5 is GateKeeper, the B&M wing coaster, and I think this is a great and pretty underrated ride. First off, the wing overdrop is really fun, it gives some amazing hang time in all rows, and the graceful inversions still manage to pack in some great positive forces. Also, GateKeeper has some really great near misses, especially when going through the iconic keyholes over the park's entrance. This coaster is also very smooth, and even on the wing seats I didn't feel a rattle, so overall I was pretty impressed by GateKeeper. At number 4 is Raptor, the B&M invert. This coaster has a great mix of intense positive G's and whippy inversions, which makes it one of my favorite inverts. The loop, corkscrews, helix, and 0G roll are great, and I even found the Cobra roll to be pretty fun and snappy. It's also a long ride, and the mid-course didn't hit very hard when I rode it, so it was pretty well paced. Now I must say, Raptor is kind of rough during some of the elements, but I found it was pretty easy to avoid headbanging by keeping my head forward, so it wasn't too big of an issue for me. Moving on, at number 3 is Millennium Force, the Intamin Giga that opened in 2000. This coaster's long, sprawling layout and great sense of speed makes this a very fun ride, and there is also some pretty good forces. The first drop is one of my favorites, with great sustained ejector airtime and an amazing view of Lake Erie. The overbanks have some pretty good positive forces, the hills in the middle give some great floater, and the speed hill at the end gives some borderline ejector. And Millennium Force has one of the best feelings of speed on any coaster, with those low to the ground turns and great pacing. Also, the Intamin T-bar restraints are very comfortable and feel very open, which enhances the ride even more. Next at number 2 is Maverick, the Intamin Blitz coaster. And despite its small size, this ride packs in a huge punch with lots of different forces. The first drop is great as it has an angle of 95 degrees, and since the lift hill is launched, you already have some speed going over it, so you get launched out of your seat. The rest of the layout includes some really snappy transitions, ejector airtime hills, some inversions, a great launch, and those crazy stangle dives. These stangle dives give some insane whip and are some of my favorite elements on any coaster. So overall, Maverick's great variety of strong forces brings it to this spot on this list. So now we are at the number 1 spot, and my favorite roller coaster at Cedar Point is Steel Vengeance, the park's RMC hybrid, and this coaster is amazing in almost every way. First of all, this ride has an insane amount of ejector airtime, so you are flying out of your seat almost the entire ride. Steel Vengeance also has some amazing inversions like the 0G stall and 0G roll, and there is also some great whip and lateral snap throughout the layout. The last thing I'll mention is the length and pacing. This is a very long ride, and it still manages to haul through the whole layout. So overall, Steel Vengeance is a crazy, out-of-control airtime machine, and it's in my opinion one of the greatest coasters ever built. So that is my ranking of the roller coasters I rode at Cedar Point. Overall, this is an amazing park with one of the best coaster lineups, so I definitely recommend visiting the park. If you agreed or disagreed with my list, feel free to say so in the comments, and if you enjoyed this video, make sure to give it a like, and subscribe to my channel so you won't miss any of my new content. And as always, I'll see you guys in the next one. Peace!